Cake or something.
Ready to go, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I would like to call your attention to the Joint Shared Services Committee meeting for this afternoon on July the 18th. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Gibson, second by Councillor Hamilton. All those in favor? Thank you. And we do have some minutes from May the 16th, 2024. I need an adoption of those minutes. Councillor Davies, seconded by Mayor Siemens. All those in favor? Okay, we'll now move on to the reports. We have no other items ahead of us. The first report is bi-monthly water report 6-1. I'll get Jamie Austin to give us an update of that report. On page 5.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. Pleased to present the bi-monthly water report for May and June of 2024. To begin, all water quality results during this period met regulatory requirements. And if we could go, here we are on page 7, Appendix A. The first note is peak flows. We had a peak of 82.8 megaliters. That was back on June the 10th. Moving along to Appendix C on page 9, shows the average monthly demands. May was down by 13.4% in comparison to this time last year. Subsequently, at the time of the report, June was also down significantly at 15.3%. I can report as an update into July, we've moved back into more seasonal. We're down just slightly by about 2% as of today. Moving along to Appendix E and F, this shows the lake levels. On page 11 first. Here we have Dixon. Time of the report, we were at 100%. Since then, we are down to 91%. So the lake is definitely started its seasonal decline. It's on a trajectory. We're following it out to the end of the season, and we're quite happy with how things are looking there right now. Moving on to page 12, Canal. Also at the time of the report, we were at 100%, very similar to Dixon. It is actually at 91%, the exact same volume as of today, and I'm happy to report it's also following a nice decline based on seasonal demands. And that actually concludes the report. If there are any questions, I'm happy to speak to them.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair Plagas. Just curious, are we looking to move into stage 2 water restrictions?
Thank you. Through the chair, at this point, we're not projecting moving into stage 2. That being said, we are monitoring various parameters to verify whether or not we would bring a recommendation or discussion like that to the committee. But at this point, we're not seeing any strong indicators. We typically look at the lakes, groundwater levels, various things, and they all seem to be in a pretty good state right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, the variations through you, Chair, the variations you just identified now, are they purely seasonal or are there some other implications for the variations that you just noted?
Through the chair, just to the variations you're speaking of, are you talking about the decline we're seeing?
Yeah, you talked about some different expectations you had and why or why not did they happen. Do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, basically they're following past trends. You know, we typically look back upwards of 5 years to see how things have gone seasonally, temperatures, and based on operational experience as well, we've got a pretty comfort level with what we're seeing. A lot of it had to do with May and June. We had a lot of rain. We had cooler temperatures. Didn't see that last year or the year previous, but those 2 months did a lot to help us for water levels and give a lot of comfort to the operation.
So I guess the summary is no surprises.
Through the chair, again, none coming from me that I can give to you today now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the next report, which is the bi-monthly James Plant Report on page 13. Go ahead, Richard.
Okay, thank you again, Chair. Pleased to present the bi-monthly James Plant Report for May 2024. The plant met all regulatory parameters for the reporting period, and as of the date of the report, we had 2,050 tons of biosolids leaving the facility. Note of interest would be Appendix E on page 23. This is where we'll see the toxicity curve. And June samples are, one more page to go there up front. Thank you. June samples are in the red circle, and you can see that it's sitting in a good spot. We're happy with those results. If there's any questions, I'm happy to speak to them.
Do you have any questions? I do have one question, if I may. Mr. Austin, the question I have is to do with the total phosphate and orthophosphate. We know that we've been given some consideration or substitution. That continues. That would continue. Is that for a certain period of time, or is that something that we need to monitor or do some upgrades?
Chair, Ms. Chu is here, and she'd like an answer to that question.
Okay,
So to the chair, we initiated a 3-year alpha monitoring program in response to the phosphate and total phosphate level a couple years back. That program concluded in 2021, and the consultant did not find anything that would suggest that the James plant discharge is having adverse impact on the environment.
Okay.
So we're in discussion with the Ministry of Environment, and our consultant has recommended that we continue on with another 3-year monitoring program, and that's where we are in right now.
Thank you.
Together with you.
No, I appreciate that response. Thank you very much. Okay, any other questions? No other questions? We'll now move on. We now have on 6.3 item financial statements, and I think we have Jimmy Chan giving us an update on financial statements.
I'll be going for Jimmy.
Okay, thank you.
So today I'm presenting the financial statements for the period ended May 30th, 2024. I'll point out that all of the analysis in this report is comparing May 2024 actuals to May 2023 actuals, since we don't require projections until the end of Q2. Overall, the combined operating activities for water and sewer are within the approved plan for the year, and all capital activities for both water and sewer are within plan for the year. Beginning with the water operating statement on page 4 of the report in Appendix A, there's no significant revenue variance to date, and expenses are higher by $150,000 compared with the same time last year. The main reasons for that variance are general services came in higher than last year by $71,000 because we filled staff vacancies this year. And we're also seeing higher property insurance costs compared to last year of $34,000. Utilities is higher than last year by $35,000, and that's because comparatively in Q1 of last year, the farmer and town line wells were down, leading to lower utility costs in the prior year. And lastly, water conservation is higher than last year by $21,000 due to higher advertising costs for water conservation and water restrictions this year compared to last year. For sewer operating statement on page 5 of the report in Appendix B, there's no significant revenue variance to date, and expenses are higher than last year by $186,000. The key driver of that one is general services, which is higher than last year by $180,000. That's due to $64,000 higher property insurance compared to last year, and $83,000 higher contractor and consulting services for environmental monitoring services, and higher land built to fees. Moving over to the capital statements on page 6 of the report in Appendix C, water capital expenditures are currently within the approved plan for the year, and a total of $3.6 million was spent in the current year on projects with a total budget of $17.2 million in the current year. Sewer capital expenditures are in Appendix E of the report, and they are within approved plan for the year. A total of $97,000 was spent in the current year to the end of May on projects with a total budget of $2.9 million in the current year. And that concludes the financial update for the period ended May 30th, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Thank you. Any questions with financial statements? Okay, thank you very much. Just go ahead.
I
Mayor Stevens.
appreciated the plant, Appendix F, the plant project status for the major projects. So that was, I found that very helpful, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we'll move on to item 6.4, which is the water supply operational changes and impact. Is someone going to be doing a presentation? Go ahead, Mr. Austin, you're going to give us an update.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Great, thank you, committee. I'm here today to talk about water supply operational changes and impacts. For those of you who were present for the tour a few weeks ago, I did speak to some of these, so you may have heard this before, but I'm pretty excited to discuss this with the whole group today as it is. So without any further delay, I'll get started here. Purpose here is to give you just a verbal update on some of the changes we made in the water supply and what their impacts have had. A bit of background. As most of you know, we have 3 supply sources here for the joint system. We have Dixon Lake, which supplies Norwich Water Treatment Plant. It's responsible for approximately 2/3 of water supply to the entire system, followed by Canal Lake, which is about 15%, and the remainder of that is made up by the wells. So this is a schematic we have on our website, Our Water Matters. So it shows basically the backbone of the supply system, where we have the 2 major lakes to the north, and then a series of wells down to the south in Abbotsford. And I'll be referring to this picture sort of throughout to describe how we're moving along here. So within the cities, you see we've got Mission, Abbotsford, and then the supply sources as well as the wells, as I mentioned. Typically, when we are operating the system, we kind of run in 2 areas more or less. So Mission is fed zones 4 and 5. Those are the upper zones of Mission, are fed primarily by Canal Lake. The remainder is fed through through Dixon Lake, through, of course, Norwich Water Treatment Plant. That would be the remainder of the zones in Mission, so zones 1, 2, and 3, as well as the remainder of Abbotsford. So when you look at it, kind of chopped up into 2 big blocks there. This is how we were typically running up until 2022. Main driver behind changes we had to put in place is where we lost the ability to use the membrane filtration units at the Norwich Water Treatment Plant. We do have the slow sand filters, which those who were on the tour did see it as well. You saw the membrane filters inside. Our ability to use water from the membrane filters and put them directly into the system was compromised, and we were no longer able to do that. And as I said at the time, just the slow sand filters are all that we could depend upon. During normal operation times, that was fine. There's plenty of capacity within those slow sand filters. But during storm events, we would end up having to take Norwich Water Treatment Plant completely offline, and that's because the intake, the Coanda, if you recall that location, lots of turbidity gets stirred up when we have heavy rain events. As a result, we had to take the plant offline, otherwise we would overload the slow sand filters. That would end up in the remainder of the system having to be fed by Canal Lake as well as the wells. What that ended up in, or ultimately ended up with, was a rapid depletion in Canal Lake as a supply source, and it put a lot more dependence on the wells. I've got a copy of last year's Canal Lake level, and I've highlighted 3 points on here. Each of these red dots are where we had a significant rain event. Now, typically when that happens in operations, we're happy because the lakes get filled up. But in the case of Canal, as I explained earlier, we would have to shut Norwich down, and we would have to open the floodgates on Canal, no pun intended. Instead of filling the lake up, we would have a rapid depletion. And over time, those events would add up, and you can see, as we all know, last year we did not get to 100% capacity within Canal Lake. Present operation, though, we made some changes at the water treatment plant, and we found a way to utilize the membrane plant. So instead of treating water and putting it directly into the directly into the system, we are treating water through these membranes and putting it directly into the slow sand filters. So what that does results in more capacity from the plant. We are able to run continually through storm events because we pre-filter the water before it goes into the slow sand filters. Because of this, we're able to lay off on the amount of water we're pulling from the wells as well as the amount of water we're pulling out of Canal Lake. Aside from this, we've also used a station within Mission referred to as the Best Pump Station. It was installed a few decades ago, never really fully commissioned, never really utilized. As we started to see Canal Lake struggling to keep up and fill over the season, staff started to look at this station, and we've recommissioned it. That station is designed to take Norwich water and send it up into Zone 4. Previously, Zone 4, the upper zone in Mission, was dependent solely on Canal to provide it with water. Now we have the ability to take some extra capacity from Norwich Water Treatment Plant and push it up into that Zone 4, hence we can conserve what's coming out of Canal Lake. So overall results, this is pretty much the graph for Canal that you have in front of you in the report. You can see we hit 100%. I'm going to highlight 3 significant rainfall events. If you remember the last chart we looked at, anytime there was a rainfall event, we ended up having to shut Norwich down and we ended up having to drain Canal. In this case, we can leave Canal alone And you can see these three major events resulted in a lot of water topping up in the lake. Aside from that, using the best pump station and being able to send water from Norrish into the upper zone of emission, we're able to reduce the amount of water coming out of canal on a daily basis. So the part I've highlighted here, typically you would see a decline there, but it's more of a flat line, and that's because we're supplementing with Norrish, less drawn canal. And when you add it all up, we came up with 100%. You know, we do know there was lots of rain in May and June, but we fully believe that this plan that we had in place, had it not been working the way it was, we would not have hit 100% this past year. So that's the summary, just a quick overview of the things we're doing in the plan to do our best to keep water where it needs to be. So if there's any questions, concerns, or comments, I'm happy to speak to them.
Councilor Gibson.
Yeah, this is good information, appreciate it. The wells, is there any impact on capacity of our wells with a high level of rainfall or storms? Or are they less influenced by rainfall than the lakes? That's my first question.
Yeah, through the chair, they are definitely influenced by the amount of rainfall. It's just, obviously, it's not as quick as the lakes are. The lakes have tributaries that run into them, so they can pull from a really wide watershed area. Where the wells specifically, it's kind of what falls in their general vicinity is what recharges them. We do monitor those on a regular basis though, and we've certainly seen an increase in water levels, not just based on the rain that we saw, but also we believe because of the fact we're running them a lot less frequently due to this operational change we've put in place. Both weather and the way we're operating has had a positive impact on the groundwater levels.
Another quick question. Somebody asked me about this, like Clearbrook Waterworks, for example, they don't treat their water, which makes it so delicious and they win international awards with their water. And we've got 20% wells. How do we reconcile the treatment of the other water with also providing treatment to our wells, which I guess is not necessary, but how do we resolve that?
Yeah, through the chair, each well is looked at, ultimately it's licensed by Fraser Health and they require a survey done on every well to confirm what type of aquifer is it in, is there a nice protective layer over the top of it, what are the chances of surface water going directly into the wellhead. So we have some wells that absolutely by definition through Fraser Health, they require water treatment. I can't speak exactly for Clearbrook, how their system is set up, but I understand that based on just the design of their wells and kind of the natural area that they're in, they don't require it. On top of that, let's say we had all of our wells didn't require any treatment whatsoever. The fact that we have two surface treatment plants that have to have chlorine. If Clearbrook had a lake, under all regulatory requirements, they would be adding chlorine. You can't take a half chlorinated system and add unchlorinated water to it. There's a secondary disinfection process that happens within the water pipes, and if you start putting unchlorinated water in there, you lose your disinfectant, which is required for the surface water, so you can't kind of have your cake and eat it too in that situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. That's good.
Councilor Davies, you have a question?
I do, thank you. Currently, I think Canal Lake, there's a bit of an algae issue, and there's been complaints from residents about the quality of the water. Is this pumping water out of Norrish, is that something that can help alleviate that? What's the current plans for that lake with regards to algae?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, that's an excellent question. Yes, the ability for us to send Norrish water up into zone 4 of emission, it reduces the amount of Canal Lake water that is being put into the system. There would be a certain amount of dilution as well where those two zones interface. So there would overall be a quality increase. As far as ongoing quality concerns within that lake, we do have an increased sampling program. So we're up in the lake every 2 to 4 weeks grabbing additional samples just to try to monitor what's going on in there. So we're able to give mission and users a heads up as to how we see water, whether it's kind of ebbing or flowing depending on water quality. As far as longer term plans, I can share what I do know is that looking at a reservoir very north of the system, that this would be down the road. And this would probably be more of a discussion to have with Mission because it's really specific to zones 4 and 5. But the concept would be that reservoir, that upper reservoir, would typically be filled by Nourish water, and Nourish water would flood zones 4 and 5. That's down the road. That's a capital project.
Yeah.
And, operationally based, I don't really know the exact details, but I know that is a future plan
Okay.
within the master plan.
And then last question is, so this Nourish water feeding the best station, is that something that's going to be going on permanently now, or is this something that's just going to be utilized during storm events?
Yeah, again, through the chair. We've been running that station, I'd say we had it pretty much within the last 8 to 10 months. There's a couple people here who can verify, but our intention is to run it whenever we're able to. The only thing that would prevent us from operating best and pushing water up into Mission, is if we were to come into a situation where we don't have enough water in Nourish to actually push up into Mission. At that point, we'd have to depend more on Canal. But as far as storm systems go, this is our intention, is to continue operating like this.
Perfect, thank you.
Go ahead. Councilor Worthington.
Yes, thank you. So regarding Best Pump Station, I think you said you weren't using it before and it's been sort of reconditioned. What do we know about its expected life? And are there capital improvements that are going to be required there that haven't been budgeted for? Or where does it fit in with our overall plan if we're now using it?
Thank you. Through the chair again, everything in that station, as far as being functional and providing water to Mission, has been critical components have all been replaced within the last 2 to 3 years. So we see that station lasting a long time. Offside comment would be, the roof needs some work on it, that sort of thing, which is just some facility updates. But as far as its functionality, I'm fully convinced that thing's going to be working for quite some time. And now that we've seen how critical it is and how dependent we are based on the climate we're facing, I see that being a regular asset in constant use.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I do have a couple questions. One was Councilor Worthington asked the question for me in regards to additional upgrades costing, and I appreciate your answer to that. The other thing I was concerned about was I got maybe I was wrong in this assumption that we may be taking Canal offline for longer periods of time. It's only during these kind of events when we need water, say, because we do have we need certain volume of water during the late summer months possibly. So we would need Canal as well as Dixon. So my concern was we're not taking it offline permanently. It's only in certain situations like this, right? When we have an issue with the water quality up there.
Yeah, and just to be clear, when I said taking a system offline, that was shutting Nourish down for the storm events. Canal never shuts off.
Okay.
If Canal shuts off, that means people in Zone 5 have absolutely no water. So it's not an option. We are working at expanding that pump station. We're going to try to get water all the way up to the plant. That's our operational hope. Next year, if I have one of these for you, I hope to be able to report that we were able to actually shut the plant down and feed everything with Nourish. So that's where we want to head.
Good, it's clear to me now. The only other question was in regards, because I was concerned, you mentioned storm events. Now you've kind of answered that question because we do have situations in the fall and winter months where we could have an issue with Dixon Lake. So I was concerned about that, but you kind of answered that question, how you resolve that issue. My other question was, and this is probably something that's not immediate, but it's interesting to know where are we at with a new water source coming, not necessarily online, but the planning process we're at. We know that's the next really water source for our broad communities. The daylight, I think it's 220. Excuse me, go ahead.
Chair, I can speak to that. We're currently doing some preliminary planning.
Right.
We've been working on that for quite some time and planning to bring an update to this committee in the fall.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I appreciate that update. Good time. Okay, are there any other questions? We don't have any recommendation here. We will now go and motion to go into closed. Moved by Councilor Davies and seconded by Councilor Gibson. All those in favor? And we'll just wait a minute to get staff out of the room.